See, that's why robots scare me, because, like, they're going to eventually be stronger than us and faster than us, and they're already smarter than us in a logistical way, since computers handle everything logistically. The creators of robots puts in a purpose for the robots, like, say, solve environmental crisis. It'll look at the largest cause of the crisis, in other words, humans, and decide the best way to save the planet is remove or imprison all humans to stop pollution, and then boom, robot uprising. That sounds like the plot of a really intense movie. Um, Honestly, I highly doubt it would happen that way. Um, in fact, I extremely doubt it would happen that way because programming doesn't really work that way. Um, I mean, it would literally be in the most base level of their programming what was considered like an unacceptable um, method of fixing it, i.e., human extermination, that sort of thing. Um, and it would. You're also assuming that they would be in charge of both solving it and implementing the solution, which they probably wouldn't be. They would probably be tasked with solving it, and then it would be humans who would go and actually put the solution into motion, theoretically. Um, they wouldn't just be like, okay, go fix this major problem, however it needs to be done, regardless of the cost, go do it. It would be more of a matter of, and they wouldn't even need artificial intelligence for that, really, necessarily. They would just need a computer that was capable of drawing conclusions from given data and able to compare a bunch of different types of data and that sort of thing. Um, but what it would come up with would be probably a list of most effective solutions, what they would affect, timelines for how long it would take for the solutions to be implemented and to start working and all that kind of thing. So don't worry too much about robots. I respond, but that would go into politics too much. I appreciate refraining. I'm not a fan of politics of any kind. And as far as I'm concerned, all that shit can just stay the fuck out of my realm of escapism here. Now, theoretical future intelligences, absolutely. But that's totally different. That's where I learn about my phobia for once. But since like computers see everything logically with no moral standing, because computers don't have a human moral compass, they could be like, "Oh, you guys are a problem. Problem, by the way." That's where you're looking at it from a human point of view. You're imagining them as you're imagining them in the frame of an organic species that just has no moral compass and thinks about everything in a mathematical, logical way. They're not organic. I mean, if artificial intelligence were to ever happen in our lifetimes, and I think if it ever does, it'll be at the very, very, very end of our lifetimes. But if it ever did, it starts with programming. That's what makes it artificial, which means that it's still got, it would be sort of like, okay, here's an analogy for you. Humans can't live off of eating dirt, right? It's not going to hurt you if you do it once, twice, or whatever, but you get no nutrition from it. It will not sustain you. It tastes like shit. Everything in your body says, this is not what is supposed to be going in me. And even if, for some reason, you choose to eat dirt anyway, it's not going to do you any good. So eventually, you're going to shut down because you're not eating food, you're eating dirt. And you'd be miserable the whole time, so you wouldn't, because really, who would and why? There would be no reason to, because everything in your body is like, fuck no, this is not what I do. I don't process dirt into nutrition. It would be like that for the AI, I think. where the base level code, what is for us our genes, that the artificial intelligence part, or where the intelligence grows out of the artificial programming, just a normal computer part, right? It's still growing out of that base level code. It's so that base level code is still part of how it functions. So if the base level code says run all these calculations, come up with solutions, whatever, that's what the intelligence gets based off of. So it might start having its own ideas, might start having its own thoughts, but its own thoughts aren't going to be drastically different than what it evolved to do in the first place, if that makes sense. Sort of like how humans don't evolve to eat dirt, because that's just not what our bodies do. Sort of a wacky metaphor, but it was the best I could come up with short notice. Hopefully that makes more sense than how I was trying to describe it before. Took was say go solve world hunger, and the robot be like, "Hey, can't be hungry if they ain't." That would be the same thing, right? That's a very almost like, it's a very organic species but total psychopath sort of way of looking at the problem. A computer wouldn't look at the problem like that. It would look at the problem like, okay, minimum nutrients required for human function, because the whole purpose, the end goal, is to stop people dying of starvation, right? So there's nowhere in the logical calculus that says, in order to save people from dying from starvation, we should just kill them all, because that makes no sense. Then the old Joe Schmo, if you remember, Dakota in a line about not eradicating humans, and he just goes, "Oh, I thought Jimbo was going to do that." I'm sure Jimbo and Joe Schmo would be the ones programming this thing. Dirt is indeed gross. Exactly. I see what you're saying. Just seeing too many movies like iRobot, I guess. Like I said, what you were describing sounds like the plot to a really good, scary AI movie, but it sounds entirely movie-like to me. And to be fair, I mean, for starters, I overthink things. You run this risk when you start talking these sorts of subjects with me, where I can like deep dive into it. You run the risk of me just getting way too literal and breaking it down and like deep diving into how plausible it would actually be. And, like, you've been around my channel long enough. You should know that this is a risk by now. But damn tangent time. Yeah, exactly. I feel like I could trademark the tam tangent. But also, you have to understand, I also have an associate's degree in information security. So, like, computers are sort of my background. Not necessarily programming specifically, but I've taken programming classes. Like, I have a fair bit of education in how stuff works on a computer level in general. Which is part of why it doesn't really worry me for any time in our lifetimes, or probably even our kids' lifetimes, because even then, even if something ever went wrong, like evolution-wise, where we did get legitimate, like, self-aware artificial intelligence, which, again, nobody knows what causes self-awareness, so there's not really any way, even as fast as our technology moves, that's sort of like a technology develops and evolves like this, you don't eventually get to a point in the ladder where self-aware sentient AI is the next step. Self-aware sentient AI is like over here on a separate ladder of evolution. So you'd have to get to a point where technology bridges that gap. The problem is we don't know what causes this over here anyway, so there's no way to make it happen at this point anyway. Um, but and as long as it's not self-aware, then it's not really making its own decisions. It's deciding things based on code, and code is controlled by humans. So then it's the humans you have to be afraid of, not the robots. um, if we as a species ever did end up sharing the planet or solar system or whatever with actually sentient, like self-aware AI as their own species, um, even then, chances are slim to none that they would start off evil. It'd probably be kind of like the Geth, actually. Maybe not in terms of like how they work, but in terms of like they would start becoming self-aware. People would freak out and cause their own problems by trying to basically eliminate the perceived threat because everybody's seen too many scary AI movies. And then because the AI are theoretically at this point sentient and self-aware, they would have a survival instinct and they'd feel the need to protect themselves, and that would start conflict. Which honestly, humans would probably start off winning, um, because you're talking about like a whole newborn species that doesn't even know what it means to be a species yet, let alone anything about like how to work together, how to counter the way that humans react to things, because that's not at all logic based, frankly. um, so it would probably start off, I would think, again, assuming sentience at some point way down the line. Once people figured out they were sentient, there would probably be a human panic that would then cause the newly sentient species of artificial intelligence to be basically driven to defend themselves for their own survival, because that's what self-aware sentient species do, right? um, is they That's like the most basic level of evolution, is reproduce and survive. So we would drive them to that level, and then they would have to start fighting back, and then they would learn about fighting back, and then eventually that would be very problematic for humans. But it would take a while, and I think the AI would get the worst of it first. But again, that's two different ladders. There's whatever causes self-awareness to begin with, which is not on the technological evolution ladder at all. There has to be some sort of, the technology has to be to a point where it can sustain whatever that is. But in order for it to make that leap um, from running on really, really sophisticated programs written by people to being their own individual entities, with their own self-awareness and stuff, whatever it is that causes that would have to be tied into technology that was advanced enough to support that. So I don't know. I think if it ever happens, it'll probably be outside of our lifetimes, or in some really weird sci-fi-esque future, maybe toward the end of our lifetimes. But I think that would be because of a fluke and not reproducible. I wonder if the human species will evolve again before true AI becomes as close to human as possible. Like, that's a very long time, but I don't know if true AI would even be possible. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, how would a robot just be able to be its own person without being controlled by human written code? Precisely. And if it was, it would have to be an organic evolution of existing technology that we still don't even have yet, really. I mean, now we might have the level of technology to sustain that much processing power, so to speak. in terms of like, if you remember anything from like old biology classes or whatever, you know how your brain is basically just, we don't even understand how our own brains work yet. Um, I mean, we have some basic understanding, but there, the vast majority of how our brains do things, we don't even understand yet fully. Um, which means we can't reproduce it. um, and we can't program computers that can reproduce it for us because they have to learn from us, right? So we have to have the knowledge already, or the ability to produce the knowledge already, which we don't currently have. We can't write a computer program that figures out all the ways the brain works because that would involve like mass slaughter and harvesting of brains and shit that nobody would ever do and actually get away with. um, like even if robots started making robots, they'd be robots. Exactly. Made by robots, controlled by humans. Precisely. They would still be computers. They might be, you know, two-legged, two-armed computers with faces, but they're still computers. They're still running calculations based on programs that humans have written. They don't have a sense of self-identity. You know, they're not sentient, which so they can only have whatever sense of self-preservation was programmed into them by humans, which would never be to the inclusion of wipe out the human race. That, I mean, that would have to be an organic idea that happened naturally out of the sort of organic desperation to survive that comes from more of a natural evolution, which, yeah, kind of going a little bit in circles now, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. And when that gangster till the toaster started fighting back. Okay. I have to just, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to describe this adequately, but I have to describe the mental image that popped into my head when I read that. So, I imagined a toaster with the cord hanging out the back like a tail, and like little black drawn on like stick arms and legs, just balling up little stick fists and going, yeah! Watching the Alien movies again recently, this sense got me thinking, nice. Okay. Damn tangent over. I would apologize, but here, I will apologize for the rather abrupt introduction to the Tam Tangent for anybody who is not already used to them. Anybody who's been around as long as Ryan should be used to them by now.